Good evening, everybody. I'm Linda Forrestall from Seacoast Real Estate Group, and I'm here today at the home of Ed Langley and Marjorie Langley on Brewster Ave. As you can see, we're along Ural Beach.
Ural Beach is just down here on the farther end. This is the curve, and this is called Shirley Gut on behind
Shirley
us.
Gut. And these are some of the homes that are kind of tucked away. You don't really realize they're here when you're driving the main streets of Winthrop. And Ed is going to give us a quick tour of his home. He's got a great front and rear garden that you really should take a good look at.
Let me tell you about our house. I built the house in 1952 after I came back from the war. You'll notice we have named it Tide Watch because we watch each tide as it comes in. We try to tie our gardens in with the house to enhance the house, to bring it down to the beach size. And we try to put plants that were indigenous, that is, that grow by the seashore. And we started off by putting a seawall in the front so that when the waves came over the front seawall, they wouldn't inundate the house. All right, you'll notice that I have some granite boulders in front which simulate a seawall. To take the starkness away from the boulders, we've planted in plants that are indigenous to the seashore, and we'll start on the other end. This is a blue rug juniper. Notice how it pours over the stone as if it were water. We move this way, and we have another plant which likes the sandy soil and the dry climate here, and this is called a cotoneaster. This is a festucia grass. This is more of a desert grass than a seashore grass, but it still likes the dry climate and the sand. We move over this way. Now, notice that there are a number of plants here. All of these festucias have grown from one plant. The plant migrates by the seed blown by the wind and finds new homes. This is the statice, another plant that grows by the seashore. If you'll come a little closer, I want you to see something here. These are babies which have grown from this seed of last year. The wind will blow it, and the winds are prevailing from the northeast. They'll blow it, and they've caught in the crack underneath the granite. What I'll do is I'll take some of these out, plant them somewhere else, or use them as gifts to somebody else. This we know is eelgrass. It grows along the seashore. It's used down on the Cape to create sand dunes, to hold the seashore from eroding too much of the beach. We planted it here and down in the back. If you'll come with me, I'll show you how we apply it down in the back.
A nice breeze down here.
It is. We have prevailing easterlies coming in this way about 2 in the afternoon, but the rest of the day it's coming from the west. So we place our chairs around the house to take advantage of whichever way the breeze is coming. This is called a flowering quince. Nice and green now. Takes very little water. But it's unique in that in the spring, it's the very first shrub to show some flowers, and they're bright orangey red. Back in the days of the Revolutionary War, these were found way back in the internal part of the state where the farmers wanted to find his boundary line. He put one of these on each corner. And in the spring, the first thing he's seen were these flowers of orange and could tell his wife just where his boundary extended.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. This is called a cotoneaster. This is a match to the one on the other side. Notice how it creeps close to the contour of the sand. The nice part about it is it's resistant to the wind only in that it's close to the ground. These are called bouncing bets, and you'll find these all along Point Shirley seashore. And these seed themselves. This is a unique plant. It's called sweet clover. And when the children come around, what we ask them to do is smell. And if you want to smell nice all day long, you put it in your pocket. This is a bachelor button. And when I was talking about the sand migrating and the seeds migrating, this plant was located about 8 feet up there on the rocky bank. The seeds from the plant blew down, landed here in the sand, and set root And these are new plants this year. They look so nice, I couldn't bear to move them back where they belonged. This is a plant which most people call a weed. It's called chicory. It's unique that it has a blue flower on it, and it blooms about once every 2 or 3 months and lasts about 5 or 6 days. These are called hens and chickens, or called house leeks. Again, we come to another plant which is close to the Bar Harbor juniper, and this is called a blue rug juniper. Again, we have the festucia grass, which has migrated from around the front.
How much time do you actually spend out here?
Very little on this particular bed. More over here. This is raw sand with a small portion of earth just below the transplant when it first started. These plants along here require very little water. They've only been watered with the rain and once since spring. Here is the drip irrigation that I use. These take a little more water than these. These are almost desert and beach type of plants. Those are a little more exotic. And here is a unique plant that found very, very seldom in the desert and beach type of a climate. They're called the yuccas. They're shaped very, very much like lily of the valley. Notice how the flower faces down rather than up. To their right, aren't they beautiful? Yeah. They're a desert flower. This is the foliage on it, but they're unique in that long stalk.
And you had mentioned too, when do they peak? The flower, when does it actually, the month of July? More so
the challenge is trying to find something in bloom in the month of July. Most everything blooms in the spring. The month of July and August, because of the strong, ever-present wind, the lack of rain, and the wind. It's difficult to get a blossom late in the season, or what we would call mid-season. The ground that you have here, below all of these plants, are probably 200 or 300 bulbs. And in this corner, there are at least 50, 3 different types of jonquils glowing from the chimney over to the yucca. And they extend from the back of the house, the edge of the house, all the way to the walkway. They are just below the brown-eyed Susan, they're below the blue sage, and they're below the cosmos. Along the front line are a little short bulb called a miniature iris, reticulata. Here are the cosmos on the end, and the sunflowers. Now, Mother Nature fools with gardeners, or gardeners fool with Mother Nature every year, and we always have a surprise. If you look behind the sage, you'll see a little blue flower. That's a forget-me-not. Now, I planted that forget-me-not and his 4 or 5 friends as morning glories. If you'll notice the trellis on the house, horizontal and vertical, that at this time of year should be covered with morning glories. Somewhere in the spring, Mother Nature and I came in conflict, and she produced forget-me-nots rather than morning glories. This is a nice piece of garden that I have developed from seaweed and leaves in the fall. I dug a trench, knowing that the persistent summer sun, the wind, was going to make it difficult to grow flowers. So I wanted to put in rugosa roses and other roses which would enhance the boundary strip and the fence line. So I dug a trench and filled it full of seaweed and composted leaves from trees. I planted rugosa roses, one here, and one here. And they've spread through roots and filled in the whole area here. We've placed another rose bush here, which is called Aloha, one of my favorites. And it's an ever-blooming, and it's just finished blooming, and we've cut it back. This will come back into bloom again in probably about 2 weeks. Now again, underneath here in this reconstituted soil, I have several hundred bulbs in front of each one of these plants. So in the spring, in the month of April, this is a riot of color of different types of jonquils.
Very nice.
I'd like to have you take a look at this plant over here. This is a hollyhock and one of my favorites. It's unique and it creates a challenge for me every year. Just about this time, the sea fog and the rain has created a fungus growth on the bottom of the soil. And it bounces up and hits the bottom leaves. And no matter what I do, I can't keep this fungus down with spraying. So I've tried something new, and what I've done is I've put pine needles so that when the fog hits the pine needles, the fungus does not come through the pine needles. It is a form of mulch, but it's airy, and the water will go through. Let's see if it works. I'd like to show you my vegetable garden, if I may. Now, bulbs are my favorite, and so are roses, but we still love our vegetables. If you look here, in this portion of the ground, this, by the way, is reconstituted ground. These types of flowers require a lot of moisture. So what I did is I took a crate, plastic crate that bulbs come in the spring, and I filled it full of compost, and I planted this brown-eyed Susan in the compost and covered it with a mulch of pine needles. Knowing that the rose, this particular rose, is called mandarin, and this is very susceptible to a disease called black spot. And again, that fog creates a situation where the fungus hits all of the bottom leaves. I've tried to eliminate this by adding the pine needles. So I'm interested to see whether this is going to work.
Now, is this something that you thought up yourself?
These are experiments that, when you have a challenge of what do you do when your rose looks terrible? You've got to bring it back. So in pruning it, you try to keep the black spot off. And the only way I know now is to try an experiment here. We spray, but that isn't the right way to do it. We'd like to try something natural. This is a particularly pretty plant. This is called the Aetros. Our standby cosmos. By the way, these have seeded themselves. Here's a new plant that I've put in this year. It's called an Alaskan daisy. Let me explain. We have two types of plants. We have perennials, which come back every year, and we have the annuals. This is an annual, and it seeded itself. I don't like the mix as well as I like a singular plant with just red. So what we do, here is the plant that is spent. When this dries, the seeds are in here. Each one of these little pieces of straw, when windblown, create a plant next spring. These have all blown in here from somewhere else in the garden and seeded themselves. They are right now choking one of my roses, but that's all right. Give them a chance. Now these are seeds. These are perennials. They will come back every year. I planted them from seed last year, which I took from a plant. I started it and I put it in the ground in the fall. This came from that. It's the mother plant.
Oh, I see.
It's a perennial. It'll come back each year.
This is very interesting.
This is an interesting plant. Everybody asks what it is. It's called lamb's ear.
It's very soft, or?
Doesn't it look like a lamb's ear?
Yeah, it's very, very soft.
The name of it is stachys. It lends itself to the seashore because of its blue and its gray, and most of the plants that are close to the seashore are fuzzy in their leaves. Not all, but most of them. This is a violet that has seeded itself from somewhere else. Notice the new growth in the rose bush. This is about a week and a half old and comes from a fertilizer that I placed in there because the plant itself didn't seem to be moving fast enough. Notice I've had to do a lot of pruning. My wife, by the way, does most of the rose work.
Does she?
She's out every morning and she cuts back. And there's a unique way she cuts back to what is known as the fifth leaf. There's two ways of feeding. One through the roots and the other through the leaves. There's a new type of fertilizer about the last 5 or 10 years, and you're able to spray the fertilizer right on the leaf. And the leaf absorbs the fertilizer through the leaf, rather than growing through the root hairs in the ground. This is a good type of fertilizer in that it lasts about a week and a half, but is very, very swift moving. You notice that this is only about a week and a half old.
All that is new growth.
Here, look at that. This is all new growth. Now look right here. Here's the new bud. This is just formed, it's on the new growth. So we'll be having flowers on this particular branch here, probably in about a week and a half or 2 weeks. In addition to flowers, we have our vegetables. And I have 4 rows of vegetables. They're all peppers. Can you look right down in there? Can you see the peppers growing on the bottom of that plant? Well, just below it is a wine bottle.
Right.
Somewhere, someone told me that if a possum or a skunk came into my garden to look at that pepper, he'd look at the wine bottle, and either the moon or a plane reflecting a light, the possum would see it, he wouldn't know what it was, and move on to somewhere else. So you'll see wine bottles in my garden.
Very clever.
This is a clematis, and it's called Panna Colada, the one that's covering the back of the house. It's a small blossom, very, very fragrant. When you turn the corner, you can smell it in the month of September. Now, this particular plant likes it alkali, that is sweet. Mm-hmm. At the bottom, you have 20 pepper plants, which like it acid, which we call sour.
Okay.
How do you grow peppers in an atmosphere with Panna Colada clematis, which likes the ground sweet? So what I do is I dig a small hole in the area close to the clematis, and I put 4 matches in the bottom of the pepper hole. This sulfur from that match creates that little acid type of an atmosphere just for that one pepper. You come over here, you'll see my zucchinis. Now we're trying to use the ground twice for growing, and it's difficult here in the north.
I want to also point out, take a look again. His house is situated right on the beach, so this is all
This
sand.
is all raw sand here. This is all raw sand. We have here now, remember, are pockets of crates with compost growing, the plant growing in it. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a friend who lived in another house, and he looked over and he said, "Ed, I don't like your color combination." And I said, "Fred, let's change it." So we walked over and we picked up the crate of loam, plant and all, and we moved it 6 feet. I thought that was kind of nice for Fred. This is a zucchini squash. And again, gardeners have surprises every year. Some things work out well, some things don't. Not the success that you'd planned. What we normally have here is a green zucchini and a yellow zucchini. Now, the zucchini lasts about 8 weeks, and the borers get to them, and the zucchini plant dies. So what I've done over under those blue crates, if you can see them over there, this side of the cabbage, 3 new zucchini seeds. They will grow, and they will be this size in 1 month. So when this dies back and the zucchinis are gone, those 2 over there will be up this size and we'll be picking zucchinis. In between the cabbages are 4 heads of lettuce. In the spring, I planted 12 heads of lettuce. They're where the blue crate is. Mm-hmm. This side of the cabbage, where those lettuce are, and on the other side. So we've harvested all of the lettuce, and now it's going to squash. The first row here are a set of tomato plants, which are a garden type of tomato plant, in other words, patio type. Mm-hmm. They'll only grow about 2 feet tall. I've planted them this way so that the tomatoes on the back row will have the sunshine. We have Early Girl, Better Boy, and Sweet 100s on the end. Those are small tomatoes, about the size of, a little bit larger than the size of a marble. Those are salad tomatoes. Here's a particularly pretty herb that I like. And when somebody goes by, we like to have them smell it. This is called dill, and it resembles Queen Anne's lace. Now these have sown themselves, and as you can see, sometimes when they get in a position that I should take them out, I like to leave them where they landed.
Very nice, very nice.
If you come over here, this is one of my favorite roses.
Oh, it's a beautiful rose, yellow.
This will be a solid color, solid mass of yellow, and so will that other one on the other side. This is known as golden showers. It has just gone past its peak. It's been cut back about 2 weeks ago, It is now coming on new growth. This is all new growth here. Here's the new bud coming on the new growth. Something unique happened over here in my garden, which is a pleasant surprise. This clematis, in the spring, grew over on the other side of the rose bush. But because there was no shade, its feet got hot, and it migrated from the other side over there to behind the rose bush where its feet is cool, the feet are cool, and the face is warm. It's almost as if the plant had its own mind. This is a plant that has migrated from Europe. It's called loosestrife. When you drive along the highway, you'll see masses of this in swampy areas, solid masses of lavender. It grew here by itself. Some bird brought it and dropped the seed. We're particularly proud of our garden. And this tree over here is called a Japanese black pine. It comes from the northern islands in Japan, right along the seashore, and was brought here probably 100 years ago by some merchant captain. Over here is bayberry, which came from the Cape, the one on the right-hand side. I'd like to invite you back in the month of April to see all my bulbs, because this is a solid mass of bulbs here. When all of these plants are little small seedlings, everything here is down in gray, and the plants come up. This is a solid mass of yellow, a solid mass of blue with crocuses here, and jonquils all along the fence. This plant is indigenous to the seashore too. This is called a pepper bush. This is a beach plum, and this is indigenous to the seashore here. It's growing very well. This particular area here has about 6 to 8 inches of soil above the sand. I had to do that because I couldn't hold the moisture on these plants until they got started. This plant was only about 1 foot high when I started, as well as the pepper plant, a pepper bush rather. They are all fragrant, and I try to put plants in here which grow close to the seashore but give you some fragrance. This is called a summer olive, and this has small berries and is very, very fragrant. What we like about these bushes, honeysuckle in the back and the beach plum and the olive, is they have a small berry. And we have a particular bird, one particular bird we like here, and it's a mockingbird. And he comes every morning and feeds, and he comes every evening and feeds, and he just left before you came.
Oh. All right, tell us about your hollyhocks, Ed.
All right, the hollyhocks are a perennial. They come back every year. But we try to change the color.
Let's give him the light. There we go.
We try to change the color in this little piece of ground every year. One year we'll have cosmos. Another year we'll have giant sunflowers, which will come up to here. Each year the hollyhocks come up. And again, it's quite a challenge, because at this time of year, the fog, the rain, and the heat produce a fungus, as I say, under here, and it disturbs the leaves. No amount of spraying I'm going to be able to eliminate this. So what I've tried something new. I'm putting down a mulch, which is a little different than pine bark. These are pine needles. I hope, because they are so porous, that the air will penetrate down through them, dry the soil out, just enough so that it'll kill the fungus. It's an experiment. I want to see how it's going to work. This rigged ship came down from Maine as a gift. I visited a cousin, and he had one in his backyard on his barn. I liked it so well, he sent me a copy. Now, the copy is about 18 years old. I keep talking about the wind here in Point Shirley, and this is a good example of what the wind does. With the jib here almost gone and the aft sail gone, I thought I'd add a little bit the patina and the weathering to it. I don't have the heart to put the sails back up again. These are a pair of old oars which a friend of mine across the street had. Notice what time has done. All of the cobblestones that add to the garden have come from East Boston, and they were probably part of a dock, or the lead to a dock probably in the days of the clipper ships. We salvaged them and put them in over here. I mentioned our cobblestones that we salvaged from East Boston. Here's a little better application of it. This is a courtyard where we have to escape, like the plants, from the sun. We need the shade. So when the sun becomes very intense and we can't use our deck, we use our courtyard. And we have a lounge that sets in here and gives us a little respite from the intense sun. So we planted a few plants in here, and these again are bulbs underneath these plants. This is an annual, and it reseeds itself every year. The viola, it looks like a baby pansy, and that reseeds itself every year. And again, we have the dill. And one of the flowers which comes into bloom just about this time of year is called an astilbe. And I thought this one is a particularly nice one. We have trouble with rainfall, and we need water. And water being scarce, we try to save it all. Coming down the chute from the roof are our 2 water barrels. And from these 2 water barrels, from last week's rain, I retrieve the water here, and I use it on these plants in here and on the window boxes. If you can look down here, you'll see a crop of green beans. These are bush beans coming in. These were planted 8 days ago. And my wife, Marjorie, had peas growing from here to here, which we enjoyed in a salad. And from here to here, loose leaf lettuce. We're using the same ground twice. I put the pine needles down because this portion of the ground is exposed to the strong wind coming over the gate, and also to the intense sun in the spring, in the morning rather. And as a result, this bakes out, so I try to hold the moisture in by using pine needles. These will come off very easily, and the plants will come up through them. When the children come in, you try to surprise them. So you say, I'd like to have you smell this. And after they smell it, you tell them to put it in their pocket, and they'll smell nice all day long.
Sweet baby.
These are our herbs.
Yes.
This is our parsley.
Very nice. Very nice.
In the winter, we have to put our window boxes almost to sleep. So we take the window box and carry the whole window box and put it in the garden and dump it on its side. All of the earth that these flowers are growing from is dumped back into the big garden. Come spring, we fill the window box again and we replant it with annuals. But somehow along, Mother Nature has taken the dill seeds from the dill plants over there, and reseeded it back in our garden. So we now find dill growing in our window boxes from the soil we took out of the garden. Kind of enhances the flowers, I think. Dusty Miller. Dusty Miller, which gives us the gray close to the seashore, and blue. We try to keep the blue in prominence. These are lobelia. They don't enjoy the sun as much as the petunia and the dusty miller, but they'll take if there's a little bit of shade from the petunia. I particularly like the color of it, and it's low, and it's not affected that much by the wind and the sun, but it does like the shade a little bit.
I want to thank Ed and Marjorie for sharing their lovely garden, front and back, and located here in Point Shirley on Brewster Ave, which is right on the beach. And I think you wanted to mention that you would like to share your garden with anybody who would like to.
Anybody walking along Surfside Avenue, you're welcome to come in and see our garden.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Especially now in the month of April and again in the month of June with our bulbs and roses.
Oh, it's lovely. You've done a wonderful job, and I've learned a lot just walking through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Peggy Gilbert from Seacoast Real Estate. I'm here at 110 Summit Ave with Hazel Stewart. Every time I ride by, I just had to stop. This is a most beautiful garden, and Hazel's going to give us the tour and explain all the flowers that she's planted.
Well, Peggy, this is such an honor for me. People said, well, you were sponsored last year. Nobody sponsored me. And this is the greatest moment. This is therapy for me. We've been here 2 years, and we've changed landlords, and the present landlord says that I can do anything I like in the garden. So it's gone from 3 feet under protest to a riot. And the grass never did very well, especially as inadvertently somebody kindly put weed killer on it, and so I had bald patches. So the only thing to do was to dig it up and put the little white path through the middle, which our present landlord's very pleased with. So I would love to share the garden with you. I think a garden is therapy for anybody. It's wonderful to come out here in all weathers and just see what is growing, and especially perennials, because you put them in when they're quite small, and through no fault of yours really, perhaps a little love and a little miracle grow, you find that they're indecent the next year. I mean, when we came, this was a chrysanthemum which was really very, very small indeed, and it's grown almost vulgar. This one I put in last year and is a pink one. This is an astilbe here, and it had 1 leaf only when I came, and I recognized it as having 1 leaf, and I thought, that's an astilbe, I think. So I nurtured it, and here it is. The English are a funny lot. We don't plant as a rule in neat little rows, but we do love a riot of colour from February through December. Well, that's a challenge in Winthrop, but one has things coming. I mean, these chrysanthemums are coming. The cosmos fill in a nice little space there. Any Victorian house in England has hollyhocks. So I brought a packet of seeds, and the hollyhocks are growing, as you see. This maple, because we're putting in a driveway, the landlord is putting in a driveway, the maple had to be dug up at the wrong time of the year. So with much prayer and water and miracle grow, it's doing very well. So I'm thrilled with that. Over here, we have a hamamelis, or witch hazel. Because my name's Hazel, I like the hamamelis. It's a terrific plant. Early in the spring it has the white flowers, and in the fall it has good foliage. Here is a rudbeckia, which will be covered in a mass of yellow flowers with dark centers. We have azaleas. We have a lavender, which started off pink 2 years ago and is reverting to a pale lavender color over there. Geums, I think, are terrific plants. That the red flowers there are geum. They give a really good mass of color. And the yellow leaf, can you see this, is a golden berberis. This is a stocketia, and it's a form of aster, and I'm thrilled with it. Sweet williams are a terrific, good thing to have. They last ages. And then you have dahlias. We call them, for some reason, we call everything by its Latin name except dahlia, and we call it dahlia. But never mind, we're a bit odd. These are coming up nicely, and in the fall they should be good. That's a veronica there. It lasts a long time. There's also a pink version.
Do you have to put this in every year?
No, these are all perennials, mostly all perennials. And the delphiniums, perennials. There's a big chrysanthemum, or mum as you call it, growing there, and another one over there. This is the keeper of the garden. His name is Humding, and he barks at UPS men, postmen, and the ice cream van, and nothing else. And he sits out here for hours as I water and as I tend the garden. He's a great companion when my husband's out working, earning the money for me to buy plants. We have another Japanese maple. This one has not been uprooted more than twice, and it's always quite a challenge when you uproot it, because they are trees and they're very slow growing, and you don't do them much good by replanting. But we were at Fawnbar at the other end of Shore Drive, and we moved here, and I couldn't bear to leave them behind, so they came. Then there's a lupin over here. that has flowered already. So I deadhead everything. You must deadhead. And I do see 1 or 2 little more buds coming, which is a real bonus. When I had to take a quarter of the garden for the driveway, I took this hydrangea, which is the white one with the triangular flowers. Magnificent it is. That was way over on the other side. And also this buddleia, which I think you call butterfly bush. They really resented my uprooting them. They didn't want to be uprooted one little bit, but they've taken, again with much prayer. This is an astilbe, a white one this time, and I like to fill in the gaps with clear me. Those ones there at the back are clear me, and in the front cosmos, to give a little bit of colour.
And the cosmos, did you just put the seed in?
Miniature plants, but another year they will grow themselves because they seed. Yes. These are wallflowers. Now, you don't have them in this country as far as I can see. These are the seeds. What you do is you plant them in late spring. I'll just put that back. Then you prick them out and replant them, and then replant them again in their final destination. And then you hope to goodness you don't have a really strong winter, because in England they are a standard flower. In England, the wallflowers, they come in all colours, they last ages, and with any luck these will seed themselves and they might last. This is another geum going in here. It is going to flower. This is a new one because I wanted the foil again for the golden berberis. Bright red, yellow, and one of my favourite flowers, larkspur. And it's the most beautiful blue.
It is.
That's another one. This is going to be a phlox, pink. That was an azalea, pink azalea, so one's had colour. Unfortunately, you missed all the spring colours. I had, of course, the daffodils, but one had Kaufmanniana, which is Red Riding Hood, the miniature red tulip, along with the blue grape hyacinths. It was quite pretty in the spring. This is a lovely rose. I love this rose. I think it's American Beauty, but I'm not absolutely certain about that. This is Chicago Peace, and I have a peace rose the other side of the garden, but it's not in flower. The peace rose has an absolutely remarkable story attached to it, which I don't think we've got time for me to share it, but it was created in France by a man called François Meillon, and in the Second World War it has a remarkable connection with events in the Second World War. When it got its name from the American Rose Society, it was called Peace, of course, because in France it was called Madame Meillon. And when it was called Peace, Berlin fell into the hands of the Allies, and that was on the very day. Then it got an all-American award, and war in Japan finished on the same day. And the last thing that happened to it was the American Rose Society gives a gold medal, and it never ever gives it to a new rose. It gave it to a new rose. It gave it to peace. And on that day, the peace treaty was signed in Japan. I mean, isn't that totally awesome? Peggy, I want to show you something. I think this is wonderful, how nature, whatever season we're in, it struggles. Like we have to struggle. Whatever faces us in our lives, we have to struggle. Look at this. It's growing straight out of the wall.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that, there you see it? And behind it is a portulaca, this same one, which has decided to grow behind it. Look at the two of them together.
Them in there too.
Straight out of the wall. Isn't that amazing?
Nice.
This is what I call London Pride. I don't know what you call it here. And behind that is an aster. Up there, the blue. And up here, we have more dahlias coming up. And directly behind it, the aquilegia, which I call aquilegia. I think here it's called columbine, is it?
think so, is it?
Yes.
Peggy, I wonder if you'd like to come up to the balcony and look down on the garden. You get a good view of it there.
That would be wonderful.
And then
We're here on the second floor porch with Hazel, viewing the garden from above so that you can get a better look. What is the secret to your gardening, Hazel?
well, I don't know that there is a secret, Peggy. I suppose one would say love, love, and more love. You can't leave a garden. I travel a lot. This is why we really don't own our own house, because if you have the responsibility of a house and a garden and you travel, you're in trouble. So that one always has to make sure it's watered and fed. This soil is very porous. If we have rain, you would assume that you will be all right for a day or two, and you're really not.
It dries out fast.
Yes, especially with new plants that you put in. The ones with deeper roots do better.
When you put a new plant in, do you give it plant food right away to give it some help, or just...
Well, it varies, but I give it a little plant food to begin with, and I always dig a hole, fill it up with water, and really, if you have a very big tree to put in, I gather that you should fill up the hole 2 or 3 times with the water. And let it soak away and then fill it up again. But usually I'm in a bit of a hurry, so it usually gets just the one go.
Did you want to introduce your husband?
Oh, yes, where is he? David. This is my husband, David.
How do you do?
And he's a
She
great...
does all the work.
Well, this is my therapy. Humding and I do the work. But David is wonderful. When we moved from New York, he used to work for Kodak in Rochester, and I brought 600 bulbs. And we put in...
And 2 trunkfuls and 2 back seatfuls of plants we dug up from the garden in Rochester.
And he was marvelous. I think it was raining when we planted all that in Fawnbar. And then,
Middle of the night.
yes,
You're
about
right.
18 months later, it was dug up again and brought here. And I hope we're so happy here. And Joe Bauer, our landlord, is so wonderful that we hope to die here, maybe.
I'm certainly glad that you moved to Summit Ave, because I live on Summit also.
Great.
And I have a garden in the front, and I go by here all the time, and I get a lot of ideas, but now I'll know the names of the flowers.
Well, we like a riot of colour in England, to try to get that riot of colour the whole year. And this is very difficult in Winthrop. I mean, it is a tremendous challenge.
Right.
It really is. But it's very rewarding. This garden's only been in, really,
2 years.
about 2 years.
2 years, that's amazing.
And things grow, with help, they grow.
Well, that's a great inspiration to new gardeners, that they could have something like this in 2 years.
Yes.
Hazel has a little tool here that her husband helped modified, right?
What did you do, darling, to it?
Well, it was a regular cultivator, and I just took out 4 of the prongs so that the one in the middle is left, and you can get in amongst plants which are close together.
So this is how I do it. And I can get round this garden literally in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And this is another bonus. If you have enough plants, you don't have to pull up many weeds. So this is what I do. I just go through here, lift up all the grass that is trying its best to beat me, and just go like that. And it's so easy.
That's nice.
And it stops the weeding.
You should patent this.
We should.
Really?
No, it's free for anyone who wants it.
Peggy, I'd like to share with you a picture that I took of the garden last year. It was taken more or less at the same time, and there are a few dahlias out, but it was basically the same time of year. And this was after 1 year. You can see that. So I think that's about it.
And it was great. It's a gorgeous garden, and I'm sure a lot of people will drive by and get some tips. get some ideas for their own garden?
Well, anytime I can be of help. You know, I'm learning all the time.
Right.
My parents were great gardeners in England. We had 90 acres where I lived with my parents, but then I had 2 acres of my own, which was good soil for rhododendrons and azaleas, which that was terrific because in our former garden was clay and it was great for roses. A challenge to dig, and I'm so grateful that the soil is so easy. Winthrop is a gift, I think, to dig. It's you can't blame the soil.
No.
It's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Hazel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's
and
an
thank
honor.
you, David.
You're welcome.
Great honor.
Hi, I'm Doris Kelly from Seacoast Real Estate Group here in Winthrop. We're at Mr. Cargill's house at 30 Hutchinson Street, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his garden.
I thought I'd start with the hedge. I cut the hedge back last year, took it down from 4.5 feet to approximately 2 feet so that I could see up and down the road. It's come back very well in 1 year. I expected it would take 2 to 3 years. As far as the roses go, there are 3 in the front here. I don't remember the names of all of them because there are about 45 of them. It has a French name. It's a beautiful red and white rose, which, as you can see, has numerous flowers to come on it. It has already bloomed very, very well earlier this spring. The one in the middle is very pink and very beautiful rose. It's been in about 12 or 15 years. The one on the end is most remarkable in that it was here when I bought the house in 1955. And it is still here. Other than giving it a regular rose food, all I use is my own leaves, which I mulch in the fall. They are about 4 to 5 inches thick, and they make their own black dirt. But you can't avoid having the perennial witchgrass. But they stay rather well. As you can see, there are very few weeds within the garden itself. And you will find that down the side of the driveway as we go around that way. This magnolia tree was given to my wife on a birthday or anniversary, I can't recall which. It was about 4 feet high 15, 16 years ago. Don't ask me about time because it's all gone by. But it's a magnificent thing when it comes out in the spring. The hostas, which you see here, like the shade from the tree and also from the hedge. I use my own grass and my own leaves as mulch. Don't believe in buying anything that I don't need to buy.
Very good.
And as you can see, this makes a beautiful mix when you put the two together. By fall, that grass will have turned to dark, dark earth. The peonies, there are 3 of them here. They're rather beautiful in the spring. I have a new rose in here. Have a new one here which isn't doing very well.
What colors are the peonies?
The peonies, these are white, pink, and sort of almost a purple on that end. There are 3 different, and I'm going to have to cut them. I will cut them in the middle and make 3 pieces out of each of these come the end of August. I can get them in the ground elsewhere. I started with this one. I got this from a neighbor, not here. Someone up in the Highlands gave me this, and someone else gave me that. I have to say I don't recall. It was a lady from the garden club gave me the purple one. But these things have all been accumulated from various sorts and places over, let's see, 1956, just 40 years.
Roses are absolutely
Just 40 years. The hedge, which you see, has been cut down also last year. It was 6 feet at one end and 9.5 feet at the other end. And it got a little bit too much to cut it on a stepladder, so I chopped it down. But it's coming back very well. Now this is a brand new rose that I put in this spring, and as you can see, it likes a combination of grass, maple leaves, and 3 feedings. I feed it 3 times from early spring until the 15th or 20th of July, and then you stop feeding them. That's to allow them to get hard and survive through the winter. In the fall, I will cover these rose bushes up to here, about 8 inches, with leaf mulch, which will settle down within 2 or 3 weeks, or 2 or 3 rainstorms, to about 2.5, 3 inches. And that's what takes care of the roses all winter.
Wonderful.
Just a little bit of mulch. I've got a very poor case for a clematis. It previously had done very well, but I think it's rather old, about maybe 30 years. The roses on this side are similar, and they're multicolored, and they do the same. They just like this area. Of course, they get the sun from about 9 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I'd like to move up here, though, and show you one item that I think is interesting. This is an Easter lily which has survived 12 winters.
That is really good.
Initially, it looked like that. Can you see that one, Barbara? My children gave this to my wife and I at Easter. I put it in the ground, and it's multiplied.
Just keeps multiplying by itself that way every
Multiplies by itself every year. It initially had 21 blossoms on it.
Oh, God.
Now this one here was a single stem. Now I ask you, been in 3 years, and they're a little weak, but they will come. That's been in, I think, just 2 or 3 years. But all of these rose bushes have been in 25 or 30 years. And they're all the originals except the one. I replaced this one, and I have to look down under the ground to find out why there's something in that dirt, under the dirt, which is preventing a rose from blooming. The last one passed on, I replaced it, and this one is in poor shape. However, I get so many roses. My daughters and my neighbors across the street get their roses regularly. Most of my fertilizer at Oscos. It's a rose fertilizer. I've had 2 or 3 different types. Basically, they all have the same, and I'm not going to quote the percentages, but the roses like an acidy soil, so the rose food or fertilizer seems to take care of them from Osco. And that's the cheapest fertilizer that I can find. Now in here, take the one that's alive. Along the border here, there are 50 tulips buried in there, and I just took them all out a couple of weeks ago. There's not even a leaf left, but I pull them, cut them off right a month after they bloom, and then cover them. Now I do feed them a special bone meal in the spring and in the fall, and those tulips are at least 25 to 30 years old. They're called an emperor tulip, one of the few things I remember around here.
Sure.
Okay.
As I say, I haven't seen too many birch trees in Winthrop, so my wife and I put this in about 15, 16 years ago, and you can see what's happened to it. It just loves it here, but it's crawling so far over the other property because it follows the sun. However, it'll be there for 40 or 50 more years. It's a hardy tree once it gets a little bit of sunshine. The tree next to it is a linden tree. It happened to be the country, what's the word I want? The country tree of her native Latvia. She originally came from Riga, Latvia. And this little pile down here, I will run over this pile next week with my lawnmower. And next spring, it will be thicker than what you see now. Those are beautiful purple and white violets. They're absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. I have here a dogwood tree which blooms and which is very pretty. Now, do you see what happened to the maple tree, to the birch tree? It got behind the dogwood. Of course, that was a human mistake made by you know who. It didn't get the sun it should get, so I've kept it. It stayed alive, but it barely. The other maple, I've tried to grow them along the back of the property as a shield to what's behind me. I've had no problem with the people behind me or on either side of me, but I did like to have a few additional maples. Now, if you want to scan those maples, Barbara, those were here when I came, and I have done everything possible to keep them because they're just the most beautiful, tall maples, and they keep the place. You can sit on that deck any afternoon, regardless of the temperature, and it's tolerable. Yeah, I can use that word, but they're just gorgeous.
It's beautiful shade.
Someone else will cut them. I will not. The two bushes, one here, Barbara, the big one is a white salvia, which looks like a bridal wreath. When it comes out, it blooms in the early spring, very pretty. The other, as you can see a little bit of, is kind of purplish. It's the same bush or similar bush, different color. But the big bush over here on the left is another Preciphius. This is a little devil here, this fir tree I brought down from my brother's place up in New Hampshire, and it has survived for about 20 years. And this one here, this here is another sedum, and as you can see, it has the beginning of a blossom on the top, and that will turn reddish brown, mostly brown, but definitely with red in it, sometime in mid-September. Here we have another flowering crabapple tree. This is a holly, and that other over there is a holly, and in the middle is what they call a blue lace hydrangea. And it has been just like that for the past 10, 12 years. It is gorgeous, and it requires a fertilizer with a great deal of acid in it. It likes an acidy soil. Since you can't buy tomatoes, I put in a few here, and it looks like they're going to do quite well.
Do you have any secrets for growing tomatoes?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any secrets for growing tomatoes?
It's not a secret. It's quite well known, and I can't prove it because they've all died. But between the tomato plants, now here's one here, and I look at it, I usually like to see a half a dozen or a dozen marigolds. There is an odor from the marigold which, for some reason or other, keeps many of the bugs away from the tomato. It's an old myth It's not a myth, it's an actual fact. I have had very few bugs as long as I'm going to put in more marigolds probably in a day or two when I get a chance. But they will help keep the bugs away. Now I just finished trimming back the big leaves on these, which tend to accumulate and shade the tomato plant. Some people say they should be left, but I break them off like that, and they go down into a bin down at the end here, and I make more compost with those. The only thing I don't keep is when I cut the roses because they're full of thorns.
Right.
And the rose branch is hard as maple. This is another flowering crab. Now, as I mentioned to you on the telephone, what I put in is in the neighborhood of maybe $20 or $30 worth of annuals to give a little color during the change. You see those daylilies in the back there just passed, and so did these. Now this is another sedum which is yellow, and it will blossom from the middle of June until 4th of July. So this complements that one down there.
That's another pretty bush, this flower here.
I found this very popular up in New Hampshire, where I have a place to spend the summers in. It's called a cleome, and it has this lovely blossom on it, and as you can see, there's another one coming here, and another one here, and another one here. And ordinarily, they stand by themselves. Now, I haven't got around to them, and I didn't tie these up. But when we get a severe rain, it tends to drop everything in the ground. Now, this has got to be moved. I will get to cutting tomorrow. These are gladiolas, which will come out probably in the middle of August. But the daylilies are beautiful.
Let me just get a quick close-up of this.
That is really a different, I've never seen one like that.
You know, mainly because I help my daughter keep her garden. She has them. They're not very popular around here. Up there north of Concord, you find them all over the place. Now, there is nothing in nature that doesn't start off small. You take my rose bushes. In the spring, they start off at 18 to 24 inches. And they're 3.5 to 4 feet high now.
Right.
And they do it in 30 to 35 days. And these here...
That's amazing. I would never have thought of those as an annual.
Those here, when I put them in, were approximately 6 to 8 inches high. I thought
How long do they bloom?
Oh, that'll... See, this will pass, and this one will come out, and this one.
Oh, so it's really blooming all the time.
It's blooming. It'll bloom for about 6 weeks, which is one of the longer blooming flowers that there are. Right? It's really difficult to find things that will bloom repeatedly. But this will come out, really do quite a job.
That is pretty.
Now my lavender, I think that's beautiful. Catch that. I've had this for about 15 years. And it has the same, just the leaf mulch, the grass, I mix them together. And more lilies. This is one of my own trees. Every spring, I have on this lot 1,000 plus maple trees, because I use the maple tree and the maple in the little woodedges.
Right, yeah.
I use those for mulch. So inevitably, if you want practice at weeding, I pull hundreds
Oh, I know,
of
right.
2-leaf maple trees.
Yeah.
Now, if you let them go to 4 leaves, it takes a little pressure to get them out. If they go to 6 leaves, you may not be able to get them out. And if you cut them off,
They continue to grow.
Then they grow like a bush, which you don't want.
Right.
But now here, we have the Rose of Sharon. Hi there, Skipper. Good evening. Oh, pretty well. Here we put this little piece in to make a centerpiece. It has 6 roses in it. We'll see you. Take care. And it has about 25 tulips. Have a nice evening. Has about 25 tulips that come out in the spring. That starts the thing. Then the peony comes out. And then the roses come out one after the other. Now these 4 right in the back here are brand new. The stones here, and all of those, draw it down there, Barbara, all those stones down there, with a few hundred more in the backyard, came from Fort Banks Greenhouse.
Fort Banks Greenhouse?
Fort Banks Greenhouse in of about 1960, 61, I don't remember the date.
Oh.
I have about 300 or 400 of these granite blocks, which my 2 sons very begrudgingly brought over every Saturday morning.
That must have been a chore, I'll tell you.
This is what I was saying here. See, there's 1 and there's 2. They seeded by themselves. I had that flower, the Cleome, I had that in here last summer. Now there's another one. Now that's just an act of nature, a freak.
Yeah,
Probably because I had this covered
with mulch. Yeah.
And it kept the seed warm all year. And they'll bloom, this will bloom in another 2 or 3 weeks. And I love it because it blooms for a long time.
Yeah.
Now these white rose bushes, I will cut these back very, very severely when I get the time. And I'll show you one which I cut back this morning. It's an old-timer, it's a rambler, and it was all over the place. And when it bloomed, it was gorgeous. But it gets cut back like that, and it will still grow out considerably between now and fall. The other bush is a rhododendron. The gray-looking flower that you see there, that's just a leaf. That's phlox. That's white. And right next to it, the green spot is also phlox, but that's purple. Of course, the impatiens, you can't mistake those. Again, you see there's one little cleome in there.
Right, I see that, yeah.
I don't know where that come from. But the other is a Shasta daisy, which I was going to cut back this evening before you people arrived, but I didn't get to it. They bloom for about a month, and they've done very well. Now, as you notice, I put in 6 gladiolas, which will bloom in 1st of August on up to the mid-August. Well, if you don't tie up the gladiola, which will grow this high, and will produce 6 to 9 blossoms, it just caves over. It's a very heavy flower. If you plant them deep enough, they are supposed to stand by themselves, but I have yet to find that to be the case. Good luck to those people that can make them stand up. I think we just about covered it. The patio bricks are simply stepping stones. One of the big problems when you end up with a perennial garden, such as I like to think this is, and that is you have no place to stand. You're always standing on somebody, whether it be a Shasta daisy or the pansies or the tulips. Now there are tulips in the front of this garden, probably 15 or 20 of them. So I'm standing on tulips all the time.
Right, yeah.
And they continue to come back, which surprises me. You mentioned using the rocks as decoration. It's a great idea. Anyone thinking about doing it gotta have a strong back and a weak mind. The one thing you have to have is a family, because when I go away, the job of watering all of these flowers falls on my son.
How often do you water the garden?
Well, of course, it all depends on nature, but the rose bushes require a lot of water. And I just got up this morning and I said, well, I remember someone said it rained like crazy Saturday. Today is Thursday.
Right.
And that's 4 days without water. So I watered the lawn across here for an hour and a half this morning. I watered each rose bush. I like to think of it this way. They get a gallon plus of water every third day that it doesn't rain. So I don't keep accurate count.
Yeah.
I remember it rained Tuesday, it's Friday, I will give them a gallon of water.
Right.
If I'm going away, I give them a gallon of plus. And then I tell my son, 2 days later, go back and do it again.
Well, it certainly has paid off. You have an absolutely gorgeous garden.
It has done very well, and I'm quite pleased with the effort that went into it. But the design, I'm still working on this walk. See, I walk on it all the time.
Yeah.
And it wants to fall out. I fixed it, though. Down here, yeah, I'm up to here, see? And I found the mistake was that I didn't put any support in. I've been jumping up and down on this for a year, and that's still solid. But it's a little bit of a problem. You dig out the bottom, and down here, you put a flat patio brick, and you slant it in. And then you put the red bricks on top of it. And hopefully between now and Thanksgiving, I'll get to the end and rebuild this wall. When I cut my roses back, I cut them back 8 to 12 inches. And I cut the heads off them separately, put them in this bucket. Now I have forgotten these all day, but I will go in and put them in a freezer bag, Ziploc, and give them to the young lady across the street who makes potpourri.
All right.
She gets these things every time I cut my dead roses. And she says that they smell all summer long. And we've been doing this for the last 2 years. And I think it's great because it's a shame to throw all that away.
Right.
Wonderful. They smell much anyway. But once
they do. They smell wonderful.
Once they dry, she says they give out a beautiful aroma all summer long. She'll get this about once every 10 to 14 days. She'll get a package like this.
That is great.
See, you have to consider those are earwigs.
Yes, I know.
You know the earwigs. Now that is, the red is a celosia. However, I think most people call it the firebrand. The green is an experiment of mine. I want the morning glories to hang over the side, and they will bloom mid-August.
Oh, okay.
But they're having a little trouble. They want to go the wrong way. So every morning we have a fight.
So you're just training them to droop.
I push them that way, and in the afternoon they come back at me. However, I intend to win.
I like your determination.
But these here, I've had for years. Different colors, one on each side of the front door, and it makes a nice welcome decoration. A couple of people have asked me, how many impatiens do you put in the pot? How many impatiens do you think are in those pots?
6.
There are 4 in there and 4 in there. And
you must use fertilizer on them.
I use Miracle Grow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Miracle Grow. Oh yeah, no, nothing grows by itself.
Right.
It has to be fed.
Yes, I use Miracle Raw.
Yeah. Even the hedge.
Yeah.
I feed the hedge that some sort of fertilizer. They call it shrub and tree fertilizer, and that's what it gets twice during the summer, early spring and midsummer, more or less. And that's about it, folks.
You have an absolutely beautiful garden. Well, I would like to thank you very much for sharing your garden with us.
Quite welcome.
And we'll be back to see you next year.
Okay.
All right.
All righty.